something this has nothing to do with anything.
Okay.
All through my neighborhood now and other neighborhoods, they've been installing fiber optic cable or whatever it is.
Yeah. Is it U.S. Internet, by the way?
No, it's Frontier.
Oh, it's Frontier.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm just amazed that these machines can auger sideways, down and then sideways, and then pop up somewhere down the deal, and they run the conduit through, and then they run it's just amazing. Underneath streets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who the first person was that developed that technology or whatever, but anyway, that's
nothing
it's
to
just
do with
nothing to do
but
with, but I just see them everywhere now. I'm like, that's pretty cool. They can do that.
I do get stuck in my YouTube reels. I commonly will be like any sort of craft. I'm always kind of like, I love watching someone who's a craftsman, especially in craftsman type things I don't know, whether it's welding or like what you're talking about, these tools that do things that my brain breaks when I think about, wait, how did someone come up with that? Because my brain, you need a straight line to go to a straight line to be able to do this, but they're able to somehow turn it and move it. I love that stuff. It's fun to watch.
Pretty amazing.
But then I watch little Wilson, Kelso's kid.
Yep.
And he'll be watching these big, whenever they come with the big Caterpillar tractors and stuff. And I was like, I'd be watching with him, and I'd be like, I get it, dude.
It's
Still
cool.
Just a big kid watching the big machines doing what they're doing.
We just get older. We just want the toys get bigger,
Yeah, I want to drive the
drive
toy.
the big one. All right.
Well, we're back for part 2, Exodus part 2. Welcome, everybody, back to the podcast, Trust the Story podcast. My name is Darren, and that is...
My name's Paul.
Yep. And we're gonna talk about a little bit and the last bit about Exodus before we move on to Leviticus.
Yeah. Which is turned out to be some of my favorite scripture, because I think most of us, we just don't read it because it's weird and it's full of instructions that we don't follow today, and it just seems irrelevant, but it really shows you what God is trying to do with these people.
And that's where I'm actually on the opposite side. So I'm excited for you to turn the gem for me.
Yeah.
We could have called this podcast Turn the
Gem.
But I'm excited for you to turn the gem because Leviticus is my least favorite.
Yep. And I think it's so many people's. I think Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua's. I don't know about Joshua. Judges is weird, but we're going to get to him. We're not going to hide. We're not hide from him.
Well, I can't really.
But I want to plug one last time the book from Rabbi David Fohrman, and it's Fohrman, 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 and it's the book The Exodus You Almost Passed Over. And I love the title because it's the central to Exodus is this Passover text and story.
Lift it up just a little bit.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Perfect.
And it is not one of those. I mean, it's got tons of information, but it's not one of those scholarly books that talks around thing. I mean, it goes way, way too deep, and it's really, really good. So, I've got this thing all marked up, and it's pretty amazing. But so to recap a little bit of Exodus, you have the origin story of Moses, the bravery of these two midwives who went against the Pharaoh's command of killing every firstborn or every male as they're born, and going against the courage they had to have was pretty amazing. And then, Moses is floating down the river, gets picked up by the one of the women in the Pharaoh's entourage and his princess, and is raised as a prince in Egypt, and ends up killing an Egyptian slaver for whipping and hurting his Hebrew people, and then runs. And he runs and he finds a woman at the well, where we talked about the well and how all of that happens. Jacob finds his wife at a well. Isaac, his wife, is found at a well. Moses finds his wife at a well. All these things are going on, which then kicks us back to the story in John about the Samaritan woman. Jesus meets her at the well. And if we know anything, we talked a couple weeks ago that God sees God's self as the groom, and sees God's people as the bride, and is creating this marriage. And so you can even see Jesus as the groom at the well. The Samaritans, represented by this woman, is the bride. So the Samaritans are now included in the circle. Like the circle is big enough for the Samaritans, that kind of deal.
I don't know if this is tied in, but have you ever heard of the terminology, I'm going to go to my local watering hole?
Sure.
And you know what that terminology is? It's usually like the local bar.
Go to the bar.
Where they meet people.
Meet people at the bar.
I wonder if the local watering hole tie-in is more biblical than I think.
We should try that out.
Although that's what I was thinking about. Like with modern day, a lot of people will go. Well, now it's like apps and stuff. But back in the day, it's like, oh, I met her at the bar, or I was out having a few drinks with a few friends. Yeah. I was at my local watering hole. But back in the day, it was literally the local watering hole.
Yeah, could be. We might. That's maybe a book. Somebody can write. I'm not writing it. Gaucher used to do a lot of pre-marriage and marriage stuff. Maybe he could write a book on the watering. The watering hole. I don't know.
The watering hole.
The watering hole. Jesus and anyway. Can't even come up with a title.
Not yet. That's why I'm in tech. I don't have to write anything
that's true.
in tech. I can just turn stuff on.
Yeah. So then Moses meets his bride at the watering hole, and then there's this major encounter with God at the burning bush. Massive encounter, changes the world basically, and changes, of course, Moses' entire trajectory of his life. And God says, I have heard the cry. I have heard the cry of my people. Go and, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And Moses says, no. You just had this burning bush moment, amazing moment. I am who I am, this whole thing.
Yep.
And Moses is, you could almost see the crescendos happening, and then Moses goes, no. And then God says, oh, you're going. This is going to happen. And Aaron's going to go with you because you don't seem to trust your own speaking ability. And so Aaron and Moses, they travel, and they go in front of Pharaoh, and they have these major battles of who's the powerful and who is God, basically. And Pharaoh, of course, thinks he's God, and God, Yahweh, demonstrates Yahweh's power even over another god and over other gods as well. And finally relents, and the people go, and they end up across the sea where there is a ton of joy and a ton of celebration. And then there's this woman named Miriam, who I want to highlight just a little bit here too. Miriam is the sister of Moses. And Miriam is leading a group of women in singing a song of praise. And she has a tambourine. Now, I think I've said this before, Prince of Peace. If you're packing to leave on a very quick pack, think about it, you got to leave. You got to go. You're packing the essentials.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know where you're going. You don't know how you're going to get there, but you're packing the essentials. For some reason, she and these other women pack tambourines. Who packs tambourines?
I'm a musician, and I go to gigs with music equipment. I'm not bringing a tambourine.
Who's going to pack a tambourine? So somewhere in Miriam's mind, her imagination, she thought that at some point in time there was going to be time for joy, and she planned for joy. Didn't know when it would be, didn't know how long it would take, right, where they would be, but she planned for joy. It wasn't, because tambourine's not like a sad thing. You don't play a tambourine and, like, you know, you celebrate someone's life or funeral.
You never heard a ballad with a tambourine built
no,
into it.
it doesn't work. And they're just, so I find that interesting that Miriam models for the whole community as well, that you should prepare for joy, plan for joy. And so I think that's pretty amazing. And then right away, as they move into the wilderness, as they move to what they think is the promised land, is a flock of quails show up. God is providing for them this whole time. But there are times when these Israelites go, man, this is too hard. This journey is taking too long. We don't know where we're going. Moses is a quack. Really, is this God really going to? I mean, there's just every single follower, dissent, mutiny, whatever thing, phrase is being mentioned. You can imagine, you know, cliques forming, you know, well, they don't like this, you know, whispering and, you know, what's going on here? Oh, somebody else ought to do, you know, who's in charge? I should be in charge. I mean, that human nature, everything a human being can go through is happening. There are times when they want to go back to Egypt. They even say it was better for us in Egypt than it is out here. They'd rather go back to slavery and to oppression than be here. And I think a lot of people, when change happens, they want to go back. No matter if it was the right place to be or not. No matter if it was a healthy place to be or not. They just want to go back. It's
comfort in knowing what you know.
Yep.
Because the unknown is scary.
Yep. And that's, I think, again, human nature. And so I don't blame them. At the same time, God has a very different plan for them. And it's interesting. Marty Solomon talks about this, and he probably heard it from Ray Vanderlaan as well. But why take a group of people into a desert where it's going to be hard and it's going to be tough and it's going to make it difficult for anybody to lead a group of people through a desert? Well, in a desert, in that part of the world, the desert provides you just enough. So I don't even have the book here, but it's a biblical botany book I bought and I read through.
That's some deep-rooted nerd stuff right there. A biblical botany book.
My wife's like, what are you doing?
I mean, I can appreciate it, so.
And it took like 2 weeks to get here because it was like, you know, we can't find it anywhere or whatever. But it showed you the vegetation of that part of the world, and it talked about the vegetation that would be present at that part of the world, and in that part of the world, and the trees that provide shade are short, scrubby things. So you can get shade for your head and your shoulders to try to cool down, but you won't get shade for the rest of your body. I mean, the desert just gives you just enough to survive. And it trains an entire group of people to be completely dependent on God. I call it, I think Rob Bell said this as well at one point in time, I call it like you're taking these people to boot camp. You're retraining them. Leviticus is going to be all about retraining them too. but you're retraining them how to be a people, how to be a nation of priests, how to be a group that depends on one God. You have freedom now, and what are you going to do with your freedom? Well, we're going to be free to choose to follow Yahweh, who just showed you all the power that Yahweh has over Pharaoh, over chaos, all that stuff.
And when I think people, I think what's hard sometimes for people to take in is like the amount of conditioning you go through when you are in Egypt as a slave. You are conditioned to be a slave. There are things that you only know this way of life. And so when people are like, oh, and then they were given their freedom. Yeah, but they don't have a definition for that. They've been conditioned their whole lives like this is what life is and what it's supposed to be. And now they're entering into something where they're not living into being the way that their brains have been formed in conditions. I think modern day they call that Munchausen syndrome for the ones who want to go back underneath the whip.
And it's psychological.
Yeah.
Because that happened in America with plantations. You know, a lot of these plantations didn't have to have a lot of guards, didn't have to have slaves under constant watch, because the psychological effect of slavery kept slaves as slaves. Slaves, you know, the anomaly were the ones that had the chutzpah, keep it with Hebrew, to try to escape. And the people that would turn them in were their slaves. You know, other slaves would turn in their, you know, because they're so conditioned. I think there's a thing where, you know, you could have an elephant on the end of a rope or a chain or something like that, and you stake it to the ground, and then as it learns that it can't go anywhere, you can then, you know, that stake becomes weak. The elephant won't even try to leave, and it could, but it won't even try.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge of what's going on with these Israelites, the conditioning the psychological conditioning.
I think of like there's a scene in Game of Thrones, and they abolish slavery in one of the towns. And these people are coming to Daenerys and being like, we want permission to go back into slavery.
Yeah.
And like, there's just, even in the moment, like when I'm watching, I'm like, why would you want to do that? But then the explanation is, look, we had 3 hots and a cot. This is all we've known our entire lives. We're now struggling because we don't know how to live forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just kind of this mindset of like, oh man, like, yeah, I mean, you learn one way, you do one way.
Yep. So they run against this pressure, and it pushes them. And
the boot camp. I mean, as seriously as a boot camp.
I want to go home.
I want to go home. Well, you can't.
Yeah. I want to go home. And Moses through God God through Moses providing them with water. Provides them with food, just enough. Mm-hmm. God says, don't take more, just take enough for today.
How many during this time too? Because I mean, we're not talking. You're saying the desert gives just enough, but there's thousands of these Israelites in that desert. How many of them aren't making it? How many of them are, like, because there's still got to be, even old age and hardship.
Oh, sure.
There's got to be some death involved with this that also can be like, well, we were dying in Egypt and we're dying here.
We're dying here, yeah. And at least we had three hots and a cot kind of deal.
Yeah.
But this whole time, God is creating this setting up a wedding ceremony.
Okay.
And even though some want to leave, they finally make it to the mountain. And the mountain basically is where the wedding takes place. And Moses goes up to the mountain to, receive instructions from God. which we now know as the Ten Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's up there, we didn't hit this in our sermon series at all, but while he's up there, while Moses is at the store buying the ring, or while Moses is at the altar waiting for the bride, the people create a golden calf. Because Moses is gone for a while, and the people begin to wonder what happened to Moses. We better craft something that we can worship. And we haven't seen, by the way, they've never seen God. They see a cloud descend upon the mountain. They've heard a massive trumpet sound, but they haven't physically seen God, whereas they could physically see Pharaoh. Idols, you could physically see them.
Well, even Egyptians created a lot of golden statues for their gods.
Yep, and you can see them.
Yep.
And they want something they can see and touch. So they take all their gold and they melt it down into this golden calf and begin to worship it. And God's being cheated on. That's what's happening. There's a cheating happening right in front of them. And the golden calf is an idol. And God says, I can't believe they're doing this. I'm going to kill every single one of them. God goes, I'm going to kill them all. And Moses says, hey, wait. Don't do that. Don't do that. They're not all bad. Moses says, I'll deal with it. So Moses goes down the mountain and he kills a bunch of them. So God's going to kill all of them, but he makes them melt down the golden calf. They have to drink there's a price to be paid for idolatry. And Moses, for the first time, separates a certain tribe, the Levites, to join him in cleansing the people. And so there's a killing. There's a price to be paid for idolatry and the golden calf. And I think we all know that. There's always a price for idolatry. There's always a price for a golden calf. Whatever that is, the golden calf isn't real. It's always going to pull you in weird directions. It's always going to make you be less than you're supposed to be. It's always going to take your attention from what really matters. What really matters is the meeting with God. What really matters is that Moses is having this conversation. Yeah, and you're worried because you haven't seen him for a while. But you took your eye off what really matters. And what's really going on the mountain is God is doing two things with Moses. God is saying to Moses, here's how I want you to relate to me. I don't want you to worship any other gods. Don't do that. Don't make idols. Don't do that. And I want you to take Sabbath to honor me. I want you to be Sabbath. I want you to take that Sabbath. And then all the other ones are how you live with each other. God says, I don't want you killing each other. I don't want you taking each other's stuff. By the way, I want you to honor your parents. Honor your parents. Build family. And by the way, don't even look at other people's stuff and think that you want to take it. Don't even do that. God is creating this amazing community of shalom for people to live into, because they were an empire, were killing, stealing, dishonoring, coveting other people's stuff, was normal in empire. That's just how empire works. But shalom is, this is how I want you to relate to me. But most of these are how you relate to one another. And it's a beautiful document, to say, a beautiful covenant. And God says, if you live in this covenant, things are going to go pretty well. If you take time off, if you take Sabbath, and you focus that Sabbath time on your relationship with me, things are going to go, if you stop killing each other, things are going to go pretty well. Martin Luther even takes it further in his catechism teaching. He takes these 10 commandments, and especially the ones that are about how we relate with one another. He says, by the way, don't kill, but actually actively protect your neighbor from being killed. That's how you live that commandment out. Don't steal, but also actively protect your neighbor's stuff. We have some pretty close-knit neighbors in our neighborhood. Some of them have fun nicknames, but we won't bring that up here. But we will always text each other and say, hey, I'm going to be gone this week. Can someone just, watch, whatever, just to make sure that we're gone. And that happens, there's 6 or 7 of us that we have this. We have each other's garage codes and stuff like that. What a shalom, thing for our neighborhood to be able to know that when you're gone, you get a phone call from someone that says, hey, we just saw somebody pull up into your driveway and get out and try to get in your garage. I mean, is that something? And I can call them back and go, hey, no, that, my sisters live with, stop by, ask her to water the plants, So that's what those commandments are. Not a bunch of rules, but things to help people live in harmony with God and with one another. And it's beautiful. But then God does something and takes a step even further. God says, okay, you built a golden calf because you want to see where I am. I will let you know where I am. We're going to build a holy place. And we're going to put it in the middle of the whole camp. And it's going to be a tent of meeting, a tabernacle. And you're going to be able to see it. Wherever you are in the camp, you're going to be able to know that's where I am. And I'll come in a cloud of smoke, and I'll rest on that, and you can always know that I'm there. But I'm also going to give you, and this is where we get to Leviticus, but I'm also going to give you rituals to know that I'm here and to know how to live with one another. And that's how Exodus ends. Exodus ends with chapter after chapter after chapter on details on how the tabernacle is supposed to be built. God says, I don't want you to do this willy-nilly. I want you to be serious with this. I want you to take your time, and I want you to put your most precious stuff in here. Lots of gold, lots of precious gems. I'm going to tell you what the priest is going to wear, what kind of stones are in the front of the ephod, it's called, how people are going to dress, how we're going to take this really seriously, because back in Egypt, it was free for all. Here's our relationship. God says, here's our vows. We're going to live into these vows together. I'll keep my end of the bargain. You keep your end of the bargain. And as you know, as we move through year after year, day after day, and we'll get there for sure in 1st and 2nd Samuel and different books that start this nation begins, right? That they don't live up to their vows. And that's really hard. But God says, I'll take you back. And then they don't live up to their vows. I'll take you back. I mean, no. I years ago, I had a girlfriend. I know that sounds, I had a girlfriend.
I would assume.
Yeah. And we were good long distance because we met at Bible camp. So we were basically long distance. And then I moved to up here in Minnesota, right next to the town where her college was. And we got to see each other a lot, and things were great. And then one summer she was a couple years younger than I was. She went back to a Bible camp. I was working full time. And a good friend of mine came back and said, "Hey, I saw your girlfriend. She was kissing another guy." I said, No, never happened. He goes, "I'm not trying to break you guys up. I just thought you got to know." And I'm like, "No. Oh, I mean, it's not going to happen. There's no way." And but I was like curious, right? I'm like, "What, really?" So then once we were hanging out, and I said, "I got to just ask you a question. I mean, this is what I was told. Is that true?" And we were in her dorm, actually, and she got up and she went to the bathroom and she threw up because she knew she was busted.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I understand. You guys are at Bible camp. It's a Thursday night campfire. Everybody's emotions are high, whatever. It's the last night of the year, whatever. I was like, come up with like excuses for how this would happen. I'm like, I'm okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We'll move on. We'll be better. We'll be stronger. I just couldn't get it out of my head.
Yeah.
I couldn't let it go. And I was trying. And I finally just said, this isn't going to work. We weren't getting married or anything like that, but it broke a piece of trust that was super hard for me to get back. And I tried to get back to it, but I couldn't do it. And I know there's some humans can do that. They can get that back and they can work at it, especially I guess if they're married and they're going to really work hard at it or whatever. But it was hard. I just couldn't do it. But that's what God does over and over and over again in the story. The wedding has happened. The vows have been spoken. And now let's go live life together. And we're going to see that God is faithful all the time. Rebellious cheaters who were just cheating on him when they were at the wedding ring store. I mean, just for God knows, like, all right, I'm getting in bed with these people.
Yeah.
I know that there's going to be problems. I've seen it happen from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And God says, I still am going to do this. I'm still going to do this. I'm still going to say yes over and over and over and over and over again.
Well, and I keep coming back to, like, also, God kind of meets them where they're at because they come from a world where they're told how to dress, they're told what to do, when to do it. This is that's their world in Egypt as slaves. And they come here, and he's like, look, you have free will, but let me help you give you these guidelines, these rituals to follow to help create a better relationship between each other and with me. And it's almost like there's like a brilliance in the tabernacle on what to wear, and here are some rules to follow and rituals to follow. I think that's, like, for me, that's kind of what I see in that story, how the gem turns a little bit for me, and not someone being like, do this because this is how you're supposed to do it. It's, to me, God meeting them where they're at in that time period.
Yeah, Rob Bell says that exact same thing. He says throughout history, God has been progressively bringing God's people towards shalom. Now I'm adding the word shalom, so I'm not quoting him exactly right, but that over the course of history, Martin Luther King Jr. said the arc of justice is long, but it has an upward trajectory. And I think that's why in our world, when we see blatant, like very blatant empire over shalom, it's really jarring for a lot of people who care deeply about shalom. And it really shakes people at their foundations, because we have, as a people, outside of the most glaring holocausts
and Khmer Rouge and Sudan and all the killings and all the stuff that happens. Overall, we are progressing as God is continuing to shape us, and it is a long, long, long project. Isaiah says there will be a day when the lion lays down with the lamb. We're just not there yet, and God is not done with us. As much as we've screwed it up, God says, I keep saying yes. So that's a brief and not thorough work of Exodus. There's so many other things in it. But if you want to check out a little bit more about it and some different stories that you may not have picked out of Exodus, this book by David Fohrman, Rabbi. Can't call him David yet. I haven't met him yet. And at some point, maybe I call him Dave. Probably never. But the Exodus you almost passed over really works as well.
I think it's funny that we spent how many months in Genesis? Just right through Exodus.
Well, I think Genesis just has so many of these stories that we just count as myths that they don't really mean anything, like the Garden of Eden. Really, the Garden of Eden. Really, if I have to believe in the Garden of Eden, then I got to believe in a 7-day creation. I mean, we throw all this stuff out. One of the things that David Fohrman says in this book that I think I've read in other books, and it's true about Genesis, is that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, aren't meant to be history. They're not a history book. They're a book that shapes us. It counts as a history book, or it reads like a history book, and obviously there's some history in there, but it's supposed to be a set of books that shapes us. God is trying to shape a people. And when we read through these Genesis stories as Exodus stories, we see ourselves in those stories, and we see how God is trying to shape us as God's people. And when we treat them like an encyclopedia or a history textbook, we miss so much of it because we go, oh, that could never happen. That's not real history. And we miss the Nimrods.
Yeah.
We miss
the fact that there's other people outside of the garden.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting too because out of these 2 books so far, they're like the most Hollywoodized versions of these stories as well. Like it's kind of funny because I swear my algorithm is listening to this podcast as well, because my YouTube feed will fill with Hollywood versions.
Oh.
So like I've had the movie with Steve Carell and the story of Noah.
Noah, yeah.
Like that in there, along with like the Russell Crowe version of the Noah story, right. All the way to Prince of Egypt, which is the Pharaoh story, filling it all the way. Like, and it's just like, holy cow, this really is. Even all the way to my favorite version of the burning bush in Three Amigos, the singing bush.
Oh, sure, that's right.
That has popped up in my YouTube feed because
My Little Buttercup. That's amazing.
We all fired up. You were supposed to fire up.
Caw. Look at me. A crazy movie, man.
It's so funny. But I just find that interesting that a lot of and part of it is because they are poems, they are stories to help shape us, and they're full of these very vivid, huge, expansive imagery and big notions, which is what Hollywood lives on to tell those kind of stories.
And the creation piece, there's like, if you want to take a look at these books, there's 1, 2, 3, possibly 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5 stories of creation. You have 3 in Genesis, and then you've got and then you've got I think it's 4. I think you got 3 in Genesis, you have 4 in Genesis, sorry. And then you've got this tabernacle that's built in order connected to this creation story. So the whole tabernacle, if people want to research that, the whole tabernacle is being built as the new creation story, in conjunction with the creation story. And they all have chiasms, and they all have centers. The 4th in Genesis is the Noah story. The flood recedes, Noah gets out, plants a garden, they get kicked out of the garden. I mean, there's this whole thing that happens, and it's just so connected. It's so interwoven and connected. It could blow your mind. So
I wonder how many chiasms. I'm curious because I've noticed a couple of them, and the whole chiasm of the thing is God shows up.
Yeah,
it's kind of a common.
Yeah,
you know how it causes a common theme, a common chiasm.
Yeah, there is a website, and maybe we can put it on this episode. There's a website that professor has done an extensive amount of work on chiasms. It almost, you start reading it, and almost like blows your head, just pops your brain, because it's like everything's a chiasm. But of course, but we could give that website out people can walk through what those chiasms are. Again, a chiasm is working from the outside in or the inside out with a phrase or a structure that points to the middle. And what's pointing to the middle is what the author really wants you to see. And it's a style of writing that we don't use anymore. But it's all in Scripture. So there's even patterns within the plagues. I didn't even go walk into that because it's a lot to think through. But there's even the pattern of the plagues. There's a pattern of leaving Exodus, crossing the river, then spinning wilderness. Moses dies. Joshua is in charge, and then in going to the promised land, they cross another body of water, which is the Jordan. So there's all these kinds of connections and relations and relationships that are just in Scripture, that because we don't know the whole story, we've turned the Bible into phrases, into little Scripture texts that you can memorize or whatever. But if you get to know the whole story and you leave it in its own context, don't try to make these people be people who they're not. They're not people that live in 2025. If they were dropped out of the sky into this room right now, they'd flip out. They would have no idea how to settle themselves in our world. Cars, airplanes. And if we drop into their world, we'd be like, where's your phones? Even if we want to go camping for a week, we leave the camp for a week and get back into society, and we're like, okay, where's Burger King on my campus?
Nice tie back. I mean, it's why I go camping, to be honest, not for Burger King, but to love Burger King again.
When you come back. Yeah.
Me and my sister talk about this all the time. When we go out on, when you go hiking or you're out in the woods for a long period of time, you're used to eating probably way healthier than you are when you're home.
Sure.
But like you're out on the trail, but there's this thing that happens when you leave the trail, and it's like, what's the first thing you crave after a week of being in the woods? And commonly it's like, I'm going to go to this restaurant. I'm going to go get this Big Mac. I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to get this pizza. I think it's kind of fascinating. Like immediately you're just like, I'm going to go get that comfort food thing that I haven't had with me while I've been in the woods.
The thing I found hilarious that's connected to that is Tom Hanks' Castaway, when he gets found and there's this big party for him, and there's this huge amount of food, and it's like a bunch of seafood, And he's just like, I don't want to eat this. It's the same thing I've been eating for whatever. I want a burger, man.
Or he hasn't had seasoning or anything, so I'm sure he's like, this is so salty and sweet. It's just... and he doesn't sleep on the bed.
Yep.
He sleeps on the ground.
Yep.
Yeah.
The question I have is at the very end of that movie. If you haven't watched that movie, please turn it off right now or mute it. But the very end of the movie, he delivers that package with the wings on it. He leaves and he's at the fork in a road, and he's a 4-way stop. He doesn't know where to go next. And up drives a truck with a pretty lady that gets out of the truck, like some with boots and and old truck. They're in the middle of West Texas, and she gives him direction on what road to take. And she gets back in the truck and says, nice to meet you, whatever. And then he looks and on the truck is a painting of that same logo that was on the box is on the back of her truck. So that's the person who mailed that package, all those. And then he looks down, and then he looks, and we're thinking, he's going to go back to meet that lady. And does he do it though? Because they don't show that. They don't show what road he actually takes. I think he goes back and sees the lady.
I think so too, but I also think there's a biblical nature in this, because now I'm just like, because of the podcast we're on. But I think of it like all these things he was conditioned for. He's marooned. He's got all these hardships. Yeah. He's in Egypt. He's on the island.
Yeah.
He's in Egypt. Yeah. He's got to cross a sea.
He does.
He's got to go into the chaos.
Yep.
And then he's out in the real world, and he has been conditioned to a point where seafood with seasoning looks horrible.
Yeah.
He can't sleep in the bed.
Yeah, in the bed,
And in the middle of nowhere, there's a pillar.
Yeah. Yeah.
A pillar that God gives him to follow.
Yep.
And that's my biblical tie-in.
I think we should end right there.
I think we should.
I don't think we can do anything better than that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe, ring the bell. We've got an email. Last episode, we answered a question that got sent in. Please send in
more
the questions.
Yep.
It'd be so great. Turns the gem just a little bit more. Plus, we want to know what you all are thinking.
Yep.
We don't always just want to hear from PD.
No. And I love hearing questions and people saying, because I love being curious.
Yeah.
Curiosity is a big deal. So, yeah. No. Next time, we're going to be hitting Leviticus, and we're going to have some fun with that.
Yeah, I'm half excited for it. I'm excited for you to turn the gem on Leviticus for me.
Woo!
All right, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Yep.